Hello and welcome to How to Deal with Grief and Trauma. My name is Natalie Himmelrich. How to Deal with Grief and Trauma is completely self-funded, produced and edited by me, Natalie Himmelrich. Consider making a small donation to support the podcast. Go to bit.ly/support, capital G, capital T, and podcast. I repeat, bit.ly/supportgt podcast. Thank you so much. And for more information, please visit Natalie's website, join the podcast Instagram page, and subscribe to the newsletter to receive updates on future episodes. Today's episode is about the impact of pet loss. Pet loss often goes unacknowledged, is compared with other losses, and then minimized or is met with statements that invalidate the grief that is experienced. It was just a cat, and other unhelpful comments undermine the real experience of the grief pet owners go through. Both Erica and I described the connection we had with our cats and how their losses affected us. Erica's cat Wolfgang had such an impact on her own life, and when he died, she could not find suitable support to help her navigate her grief. So she created a beautiful card deck. Erica's mission is to support others in dealing with pet loss and normalize pet loss grief as a valid sort of grief. About this week's guest. After the sudden passing of her cat Wolfgang, Erica couldn't find a simple product to help her cope, so she created her own, the Pet Loss Grieving Cards. Thus her company Wolfie's Wish was born. Grieving cards have since won Best New Product at the Superzoo trade show. When she's not positively rocking in her business, Erica enjoys performing pop and rock covers on her harp or scratching and mixing on the turntables. Please check out Erica's links and enjoy today's episode. If you know anyone grieving the loss of their pet, please share this episode with them. So welcome, Erica. It's so nice to have you on the podcast. How are you today?
Thank you for having me. Today, I'm feeling a little restless, but also excited to be talking about this important topic.
I'm excited too, and as we just spoke about, this is about pet loss, and I'm excited to talk about that. And let's just start with you telling us a little bit about your life, because maybe there wasn't just pet loss, but to give the listener a little bit of understanding of where in your life you have been encountering grief, loss, and trauma.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know now that grief can be accumulative, and it's not something we are taught in schools or really by our parents on how to cope with. So I have been looking at events in my life and how they've affected me, going back to my parents separating. Yeah, that was a really big change for anyone, for them, for me, for my brother. And yet, as humans, we adapt in some way and cope. I also have suffered from a miscarriage, which I didn't know existed until it happened, which was horrible. It was physically painful, shocking, and felt very unfair. So that's another form of grief. I've gone through, of course, breakups with partners, and life is just full of surprises, isn't it?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. But I know from just the way I am, I'm very resilient. And when things happen, yes, they're shocking, but I also have always said, well, this isn't going to knock me down, and I'm not going to stay down. I want to keep going, and I'm kind of a fighter in that way, which I think is a strength, because I use these experiences as, okay, that happened. How is this going to make me a better person? How am I going to grow from this? Because that's what I see obstacles as. They're learning opportunities. And I feel very fortunate to look at life with that lens.
So which one of those losses or changes in your life, looking back, would you say was the most impactful?
Well, honestly, they don't compare to the sudden loss of Wolfgang, my cat, my beloved best friend, COVID companion. To lose him suddenly still makes me emotional. And I felt that I might not recover from this.
Tell us a little bit about Wolfgang.
Okay, so um, Wolfgang was a very funny, enigmatic, charismatic, crazy kitten that we adopted in May of 2020. And he was unwanted. He was on a farm. He had eye herpes and was, very small and needed a lot of love and attention. And I just said, that's my cat. And I nursed him. I cared for him. We saved his eye. I spoiled him. And in return, I got so much affection. And he would just lay on me and sleep. And it was just a wonderful relationship to have a bond like that. I've never really taken care of an animal or a person in that aspect where they really needed me. Um, and he was unusual because he played fetch. Um, I love that when I would come home, I would hear plump, 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 plump. And it's him running down the stairs to come and greet me. In the morning, the first thing I would say before I opened my eyes was he had nicknames, so like Beetle Bob or Deebledore. And so I would call out one of those, and he would come in bed. Animals are beautiful creatures when we have a close relationship with them. It really doesn't matter the species.
And I'm assuming that people listening to this podcast will hear your laughter and your smile coming through, but I can see that. And so since you started talking about Wolfgang and telling us a little bit about him, I'm assuming it's a him, your face has been gleaming. So, and it made me remember when I first got my first cat. I didn't even know that I wanted a cat, but my friend had a cat and she was pregnant, the cat. And she said, oh yeah, she's going to have a kitten. And out of nowhere, I said to my husband at the time, I want to have a cat and she's called Chocolate. And he looked at me and said, are you sure? And I said, I don't know. But I in this intuitive sentence, I said it's a she and her name is Chocolate. And I don't know why. I mean, yes, I like chocolate, and it turned out that this sort of coffee-colored cat, she was a Burmese mother, sort of beige color, she had all chocolate-colored 5 kitten. So, I mean, I didn't know that what color they would become, and I didn't ask, and I didn't know. I just said she's called Chocolate, and so that was my first cat, a female called Chocolate. So when you described Wolfgang on your chest, I remember Chocolate, tiny, tiny claws-like nail, razor sharp, and she would sleep on my chest. So, yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I also named Wolfgang before I met him. I knew I wanted a male cat named Wolfgang, and I just started looking. And what was interesting, real quick, is that there were no animals available at the shelter. And we had just moved to Germany. And so I was posting on message boards, hey, I'm looking for a cat. And someone responded, and they were so kind to drive us to this barn outside of town. It's a really neat experience.
So tell us what happened to Wolfgang.
Well, I had a visitor come, and we explained to the visitor that the bathroom window is very dangerous because there's no screen. It's a rooftop apartment, and the windows invert. And we said, Wolfgang really likes this window. We open it when we shower, but please just keep it closed. And for whatever reason, because humans are humans and maybe they were jet lagged and forgot, they opened it and they left it open. And Wolfgang, being Wolfgang, is very mischievous and does not lose any opportunities to be naughty. He got out. And we, like I said, we're on the rooftop, and I noticed the window open, and I yelled, what's going on? And we couldn't find him. So I went down to the courtyard to look for him, and he was there. He was still alive. And he looked okay to me. I thought he was going to make it. And of course, I rushed him to the vet, and he died before we got there. I tried to revive him. And in the car, I was doing Reiki and singing. And I knew that I was also powerless over what was happening, and trusted that I don't know what's going to happen, but it's somehow going to be okay. But oh, losing him without a proper goodbye was really hard.
I'm so sorry.
And I knew I had to accept what had happened as an accident. And I also knew that my friend was human. And I really don't blame her. I blame Wolfgang. Yeah.
How old was Wolfgang when that happened?
So this was October 2021. So he was about 1.5 years.
Yeah, still quite small.
Still young, yeah.
So when I asked you before about your previous losses, and then you mentioned that nothing compares to the loss of Wolfgang. So tell us a little bit about your grief and your loss, and how that and why it was so significant for you. Because I'm sure a lot of pet owners and who have lost pets, they can relate, and maybe those who haven't, the hope is that they will understand what that means for a human pet lover.
Well, I believe that when I sought out people to relate to and was looking for solutions to process this in a healthy way, and really started seeking, how do I go through this? How do I become happy again? I found that people use the term soul animal for that really strong bond. And I said, okay, these are my people. But what can I learn from them? Because I think that's what I had. And it's not the perfect description, but my grief and pain and trauma were so acute that I was having some PTSD-like symptoms where I would see him, but he's not there, just an object. I was having constant flashbacks of that moment that I saw him in the courtyard, and my brain had to adjust to, oh, this really just happened. He has fallen. And I had a really hard time with my brain adjusting to the loss. And these were really scary to me, because I knew that if I didn't deal with it and I didn't face it, that I would be scarred for the rest of my life, and I might not even be able to function anymore. Does that answer your question?
Well, you mentioned something about the soul animal, and you said that's what I think happened to me. So maybe I think I'm asking that because I think that actually reflects something of the reason why this loss has been so significant. But I wanna give you the chance to explain a little bit more on that.
I think it's a combination of me really taking care of a living being so intensely when he was ill, when he had his eye infection. That combined with, when we have animals, when we have pets, we are with those animals every day and every night. And I love my parents, and I love my brother and my husband. But my parents and my brother live in another country, and I see them occasionally on holidays, and it's not the same relationship. And I've had to digest why this loss was so big, because I couldn't understand. people have said to me, it's just a cat, Erica. What's wrong? You need to get over this. And I heard myself saying, this is just a cat. It's an animal. They die anyway. You know, we have them for at least 10 years, 20 years, maybe. So was it because I'm not prepared? I wasn't prepared? Why? And when I asked myself this, I think it's that during the pandemic, we all were looking for some comfort. We were all looking for ways to cope. And so my animal became that for me. You know, he became so much more than just an animal. He became my friend, my companion. And I think that's why, you know, even if someone said to me, oh, Wolfgang's got cancer and he's not going to be well, and in a couple of weeks, we're going to have to put him to sleep, it still would be just as hard. I don't think it matters how they die or really when they die, because even though I only had him a year and a half, my brain said to me, you shouldn't be so sad. You only were with him a little while. It's how do you have a relationship that's so significant in a short amount of time? Oh, I questioned everything. And I repeated everything. And at the end of the day, I said, none of that matters. What matters is acknowledging my pain, because it is what it is. I can't change that. I have no control over my pain. It's just there. And then how am I going to heal? And that became the important things. I didn't want to explain it to myself, or I didn't have to explain it to anyone. The most important thing for me was to honor my relationship with him and heal.
You made some beautiful points there, because exactly those questions that you've asked yourself or that people ask you, it's just a cat, you haven't only met him for so long, they reduce loss to the fact of conditions as to animals should be mourned more than, and like people should be mourned more than animals, or
Right.
The length makes it more so important. And what I have come to learn from my own experience, but also from my clients, is that it's not the length and it's not the person, animal, or whatever. It's the relationship that determines the identification with that which we have lost. And even if it is a job or a house, it is the symbolism that this relationship is no longer. That is what informs the grief. And I think that is important for people to understand, or I hope that people will get from this, is to say, well, doesn't matter whether it's a job, a house, an animal, a child. Yes, it matters to the person who lost whatever, but the grief is related to the importance that this has in our life, and that we have to learn, that our brain has to learn to shape around the fact that it's no longer present in our lives.
That's a very hard task. I really believe that my entire being has changed. The way that I see the world has changed. I think there are new pathways in my brain now because of the adjustments I've had to make. But ultimately, and I don't even like this because I didn't want it, but I am a better person because of it. And I have grown so much in the simple sense that my mission now is to help others grieve in healthy ways. I didn't ask for this, but I get so much joy and satisfaction knowing that I can share and relate to other people, and they then find hope. And I wanted to say something because I think maybe some listeners will understand. When people ask me what I do for a living, I say, well, first and foremost, I've always been a musician and I'm a performer. But as of 2 years ago, I founded a company to help pet parents grieve. And they always say, how? What do you mean? What do you do? How, and I say a little bit because not everyone is comfortable talking about this subject. But what happens a lot is they lean in and they say, Erica, I grieve the loss of my dog more than my mom, and I don't know why. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that for the people that feel ashamed or embarrassed or don't understand and don't know who to talk to. And because I also felt that and was embarrassed and ashamed and didn't understand. I have only lost my grandparents, so I can't compare. But it says a lot to me when people lean in and sort of whisper it, and they're asking me for permission, right? That tells me so much information about why this is an important topic. And in no way do I want to minimize anyone else's grief or the loss of their parents, their children, their friends, their jobs, their homes. No, we're not comparing it. We're giving a platform and a space to acknowledge pet loss grief as a valid form of grief that is important to address and seek help for and have support for.
So I want to say something about comparison, because obviously I sort of put a list of different losses out there. And I think it's important, and I've said it before on the podcast, but not everyone might have heard that. Comparison of grief is not really helpful, only in as much as the person who's experienced the loss in themselves can sort of look at their own losses and say, yes, this has affected me this way, and this has affected me this way. So therefore, this has been harder than that. And that is important to understand yourself, just like you described it. But I think it's futile if we're starting to compare our own losses with someone else's, because that would presume that my relationship to my cat isn't somewhat similar to yours. And it's not. It's not, because I'm not you and your cat is not my cat. So it's just futile because we can't. And even though people say child loss is one of the worst losses, I find it, you can't say that, because it really depends, as you were saying, as to the symbolism of that relationship, or what I said before as well. And I completely agree with you that people experiencing a loss, no matter what the loss is about, need to be validated in their feelings. And I guess the feelings where someone says, I'm not allowed to say that, or I think I shouldn't be saying that, is because there's those beliefs and dogmas around out there that give a terminology of grief and how it should be lived. They are the terms like getting over, move past, or it's only or hasn't been that long, or why don't you buy another cat? Things like that, replacement of loss. And all these things, they come to us via movies, for example, as one of the ways that we get fed by those beliefs and dogmas, and that's how we texture our grief. So I shouldn't be grieving this way because I've heard this. And because it has been said, we sort of believe this is how it's done. But it's not. As you just described, your personal experience was the way it was with Wolfgang. So how did you personally learn to deal with your grief? How did you practice healing? What did you do that helped you?
Well, yeah, this is really interesting because, as I said before, I really had nowhere to start. I had no compass. I had no knowledge of how to cope with this. And I looked for books. I thought, okay, I need some instructions. There's got to be books on how to cope with grief. There are millions. And I said, well, how do I know which one to get for my pet loss? And do I have to read the whole book before I know I'm going to be okay? Because that takes a long time and it takes a lot of focus. And I don't really have focus right now. My brain feels like scrambled eggs. So a book isn't going to work for me. Okay, well, maybe I can find some affirmation tools because I really like Louise Hay and what she teaches. And her teachings have been around for decades. So let me look and see if she has something on pet loss grief. No. Well, what about someone else? Are there some cards? No. Oh dear. And I said, okay, let me just sit and ask myself with my reflection time that I do every morning with my it's not really meditation, but I call it quiet time. Let me ask myself and listen for answers on how to do this. And it took some time and patience, but I said, I'm going to acknowledge my feelings and I'm going to be intuitive. Okay. And my intuition said to go spend time in nature and be healed by, the wind and the birds and the green, because that's always been grounding for me. So, okay, do that today. The next day, I had the impulse to write Wolfgang's story in a love letter that I could keep because I was terrified to forget the fetch games and the way he would cry like an eagle or make this strange sound when we gave him turkey meat. And, I know everyone has these moments that they treasure with their loved ones and their pets. And so I wrote this paper and it became 7 pages long and it poured out and I laughed and I cried and I felt so relieved that, okay, it's down on paper and I can't forget now. And I'm going to put this in a safe place, knowing that in 10 years or whenever I need to, I can pull this out and read it. I also started collecting all of my photos and videos of him in a safe place in a folder, right? And so gradually, I just let my intuition guide me. And I would share these with my mother every day on the phone. And she said to me one day, Erica, it sounds like you should write this down because these are helpful for me. I've lost 7 cats in my life. And I think you need to make this affirmation deck that you couldn't find. And I said, no, Mom, I'm not doing that. I don't I don't want to help other people right now. I'm still grieving. And that's a lot of work. But my mom is very patient and kind and encouraging. And she said it again. And I said, maybe. um, and then I started to like the idea. And Natalie, I sought out professional help because I decided that I needed to check in with someone to say, have I lost my mind? Have I cracked? Because I feel completely broken. And I don't know if these daily things are going to really repair me. So I sought out a counselor, which was very daunting because I didn't know that pet loss counselors existed. I knew grief counselors existed because my stepmother used one. And I did. I found a pet loss counselor and I thought, oh gosh, how is this going to go? I don't know. I'm scared. We met and I liked her. And she was so understanding and compassionate, which I needed. And what she told me was that I was normal, even though I have addiction issues that I've dealt with and struggled with my whole life. I have a mental illness. I'm bipolar and I treat that. I have ADD and I've been managed and treated that for 25 years. When she told me, I thought for sure because of those things, I was special or somehow was grieving more than I should. I couldn't really believe her when she said that other people feel the same way. And that was the aha moment for me that changed my entire life.
So her normalizing your grief.
Yeah, and also that I knew my mom was right. that we had to do something
Hmm.
and make simple tools available to anyone. I mean, I don't have all the answers. I'm not a counselor. I'm not, and I never pretend to be. I only share what helps me.
Hmm.
And so we made the deck. We made the card deck. Yeah.
So how would people experiencing pet loss, how would they use those cards for people to
Yeah.
get an idea?
Well, they just open the box and shuffle them and read them all. There's really no wrong way to use them. And it's impossible to write a one size fits all grief deck. So I tell people, if you pull a card and you don't like it, give it away or put it in the back of the deck and try another one. And to this day, I've never had anyone say to me, I hate these, I want my money back, or these are dumb, which I was really scared. I thought that I would surely get some messages. But no, in fact, just after we made them, we went to a pet trade show to introduce them to North America.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a contest for best new product. We said, well, let's try. This is either going to be great or I'm going to go home and put all these cards in the closet. And we won a best new product award. It's first runner up. But that told me that these are a worthy tool, that these are worth pursuing and sharing. Yeah.
So for those people who are already interested and wanted to know about that, we're going to put all the links in the show notes. So go check them out on Wolfie's website or Erica's website. They're all there for you, or they're there for you to look at, and people can, how can they get them? They can order them through the website, or are they also in other shops available?
They are in some shops in pet stores in America, but we found that in pet stores, people typically don't go in to buy this product. So we stopped selling them to pet stores and now have partnered with, one company, for example, is wonderful, and I didn't mean to promote them, but here we are. It's called Spoonful of Comfort, and they send care packages of soup and blankets and cozy things. So in that they've now added our cards for their pet loss baskets. So it's pretty special. But yes, we sell them direct on our website. And also offer a lot of free resources because, like I said, when I was looking for help, I didn't know where to go. And I said to my mom, it's really important that I can try to provide something for everyone, whether it's a book or a podcast or a blog or an interview with a pet loss professional. So all that's there. And I made this downloadable love letter template. So someone can have some nice stationery if they want to do this exercise of writing. And it makes me feel so good that I'm doing a small thing that can help other people.
Yeah, and you're saying that reminds me of the time. So to make the circle round from my Chocolate, she wasn't my only cat. I then needed a second cat because she was lonely. It was quite obvious. And so I said, okay, we can only have chocolate and vanilla, or chocolate and strawberry, or chocolate and... So we got a vanilla colored cat, a he, and he's called, or was called, Vanilla. We called him Nilly short. And they both died just shortly one after the other, because I think they were like, Chocolate died first and then Vanilla a little bit later, half a year later. They were also 15, but I remembered when Chocolate died, this was significant because it was a decision to take because of her state, that we had to put her to sleep. And as long as it was a decision that was made consciously, I was apparently fine. But as soon as it started to sink into my heart, it was devastating. And devastatingly beautiful, because it showed me the importance that this cat had in my life. And she was the one that taught me how to care for another human being. Basically, I say it to my daughter now, she was the one that taught me caring for a baby in the future, because even in the beginning when we had her, she would cry every night and she would keep me awake like a baby would. So, but in respect to what you were saying about your cards, the part afterwards, how we cremated them and how these people dealt with us. I mean, I could see your cards in a place like that, which would be beautiful, where people come and want to honor the last part of their pet's life in some way. And that's beautiful, because like my daughter needed to have some ashes in a chain that she can carry if she wants to, and we have some urn, one for Chocolate and one for Nilly. But I think it's important for people listening to understand that if they're feeling the loss, that is so normal. Is there anything else that you want grievers, pet grievers, to know that would have greatly improved your journey from the beginning?
Yeah, I think that the most important thing is to acknowledge grief in whatever form it presents itself. It's nothing to be fearful of. It's a part of life. And the best thing I think anyone can do is ask themselves, what would work for me? What will work for me now? Do I need to detach and not think about this now and know that I can come back to it later? I don't have any of those answers, but I think we all have the capacity to heal if we're willing to look and go there. And we have to walk through what I think of as fire. But if I can do it with my addictions and my mental illness, then I know other people can do it too.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for those last few words. Just encapsulated the hope that I hope that this podcast brings to people dealing with grief and trauma. So thank you so much for taking the time, Erica.
Oh, I'm happy to talk about this any day. Thank you.
Would it be okay now to finish with the rapid fire questions?
Sure.
Okay. So grieving and trauma means?
Difficulty.
And healing means?
Peace.
What I have learned about myself in the light of pet loss and trauma of finding him as you did.
I have learned that no matter what I experience in life, I can learn from it, grow from it, and even better, use it to help others.
And what is one thing that you wish people knew about pet loss in specific?
That it is debilitating and needs so much patience, love, and compassion, and that there's no time limit for grief.
So one specific thing that has changed since your loss and trauma that you wouldn't want to miss, what would that be?
Love. And Wolfgang showed me how lovable I am just the way I am.
That is really touching. Thank you. Thank you so much, Erica, to share the light on pet loss and to share your experience and to be so vulnerable and authentic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to How to Deal with Grief and Trauma. If you'd like to be updated on future episodes, please subscribe to my newsletter on nataliehimmelrich.com. If you need grief support, please contact me for a 30 minutes free discovery session. How to Deal with Grief and Trauma is produced and edited by me, Natalie Himmelrich. To support this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe to or follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you. And remember to keep breathing. I promise it will get easier.